Hello and welcome to the next video in this short course on understanding anxiety and some free tools to help to manage the experience of anxiety. In this video we're going to be talking about how to get out of your head and be present in the moment. When we experience anxiety, it can feel that we get stuck in our own minds and consumed by thought. We're going to be talking a bit about that now as an experience, and also some of the physical structures and physiological processes that are involved in us to be stuck in our own thoughts, and a really powerful tool that we can use to switch our attention to our external world and be more present in the moment, and how that works and how it's used in some therapeutic disciplines. This is an area I find really fascinating, really useful and really powerful, so I hope this is a tool that you'll find to be interesting and useful, and you can add in to a growing toolkit that I have for you here at the Mindworks to help to improve your emotional and psychological well-being. So let's get into it. This is for information and educational purposes only, and this can't be a replacement for individual one-to-one therapy. As I've said before, I do believe that understanding how our psychology, how our physiology, how our physical health works, how our environmental and relationship stuff all plays in to our experience of anxiety, getting that foundational knowledge is absolutely critical in managing our psychology and our mental health and general experience of life. So that's what I'm hoping that this course will provide for you, along with all the other content that you'll find here on the course. So in the first video, I think it was the first video, we talked about the 4 pillars of our emotional well-being, our psychological state, our experience of life. That we have our psychology, we have our physiology, we have our physical health, and our environment and our relationships. And in this video, principally, we're going to be talking about physical structures in the brain and how our brain actually works in order to receive and process information, and whether we are present in the moment or whether we are stuck in our own thought. What is actually going on, what is understood of how the brain as a structure, as an organ, actually is working. So what do we mean by present? For me, that means being focused on our external senses, being focused in our external environment. If we are stuck in our thoughts, then we can't really be present in the moment itself. If you think of an example of when you might be present in the moment, having a conversation with a good friend where it's free-flowing and there's no pretense, and you don't have to worry about what you might say or what they might say, what they might be thinking about you and you're thinking about them, that it can just be really natural and really easy, and you can be in that flow state. Then for me, that is what we're talking about being present, being here and focusing. And that means that we're focused on the world outside of us rather than in us. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how our brain determines what we should be concentrating on and what we should be focused on. When we are focused on the external world, that is actually from a brain perspective using a lot more energy than it does for us to not be focused on the outside world. So naturally, and without conscious choice, our brain will switch into a mode of being more neutral, being more idle, being in a self-reflecting, inward-looking state, because it conserves energy. And our brain is principally interested in using and conserving and reserving the amount of energy that it's using regularly. So, but it is also important for those of us that experience a more anxious or the mental health condition and presentation of anxiety to be focused on our external world. So how do we do that? How do we get out of our head and be more present in the moment? So coming back, just circling back quickly and briefly to what we've talked about previously, we talked about overthinking. We're now talking about being stuck in our own head. And if we think back to those different parts of our psychology, the different mindsets, there may be a lot of chatter going on the inside from those different parts. And sometimes we just need a tool that can get us out of that chatter on the inside and be focused on our external world. We can feel almost that we're consumed by the thoughts that we're having. In psychological terms, in therapeutic language, we might call this rumination, which is defined as repetitive thinking or dwelling on negative feelings and distress and their causes and their consequences. A thoroughly unpleasant place to be. So again, it's useful to have, if we find ourselves in this place, a tool and an understanding of the mechanism in order to switch our concentration to the outside world rather than our inner world. So overthinking, or is it? Coming back to the idea of we're all going to experience anxiousness and worries, and if you're here, presumably that is because you're interested in learning more about anxiety. Having a tool and understanding that we can switch our focus of our attention from what is going on the inside and to avoid that rumination, to being stuck in our thoughts, to being focused on the outside world and therefore taking positive and proactive external action is really useful. So when we have thoughts, when our brain is perceiving our environment, our brain is responding to the thoughts we have, and it will in turn prepare our body. In the next video, we'll be talking about the mind-brain-body connection, how the thoughts we have change the chemistry of our brain, and then our brain communicates that throughout our body, particularly when we think about something like the stress and the fight or flight response, in order to give us the energy and the ability to move out of the difficult situations, or in fact, as we'll look at now, some different emotional states where we may feel completely frozen and stuck. So we have the fight or flight response we just talked about briefly. There are some others too. Kind of in excess, or as we exceed that flight or flight response, we have two other states of being. We have the freeze response. That is where we can feel completely shut down, where it feels like we can't move, and it feels like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And we use phrases like weight of the world on my shoulders, or stuck, or that we can't move, because that's what it really does feel like when the stress and the anxiety response gets to that such elevated level. So a tool like this that hopefully can help us to reduce the stress response before we get to somewhere like this, I think is going to be a really powerful tool to have in the toolkit. Being able to get out of our head is crucial. So the two structures, the physical areas of the brain, physical structures, almost organs within the organ of the brain that we're going to be looking at today. One is called the insula, and what that is doing is filtering and starting to process external sensory information, predominantly through our eyes and ears, but also temperature and taste and smells and touch. All of this stuff is going through this structure of our brain, and it's starting to make determinations on what is important to us. When we're concentrating on something very closely, then it is that part of our brain is going, oh right, well this person, he, she, they is now concentrating on this, it must be important, and therefore it starts to fire up that external focus. We become more present in the moment, and it's that ability that the brain has of switching from internal world to external world that we're going to leverage with this tool. The other part of the brain that is principally involved with rumination, being stuck in our thought, is called the default mode network. It's areas of the brain about kind of here, where I'm pretty grey. I wonder if there's a link. The areas of the brain that light up when we are self-reflecting and introspecting, when we're having those thoughts about ourselves and we feel that we are stuck in our heads. So when we concentrate on the outside, and new information is being processed through that first part, through the insula, then our brain switches on to the outside world, and that default mode network, the areas of the brain in the cortex which are involved in rumination and self-reflective thought, they start to slow down. So there is a reduction in activity of the areas of the brain that are involved in that introspective thought, and it is that introspective thought that can then cascade into our experience of anxiety. If you've experienced traditional counselling, a very common technique that is used if somebody's experiencing emotional distress or becoming overwhelmed in the conversation that they're having with the therapist, it may be that they're suggested to find 5 objects around the room. So you would find a book on a shelf or a plant in a pot, looking out the window to see a different object. And as you move your attention, the focus of your attention from specific objects in the room, then that is having that effect of activating that insula to refocus your brain on the external world and to become more present. There is a therapeutic technique called EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. It is a technique that is specifically developed to help people to overcome the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it is approved by the NHS. It is a technique where people move their eyes in a rhythmic pattern, almost like watching a tennis match, from left to right, and it helps to calm the entire nervous system. This has been observed in clinical studies where the operating mode, if you like, of the nervous system relaxes ever so gently in order to help people to continue to work through whatever it is they're working through with their therapist in that therapeutic setting. It's a very, very powerful technique, and it's used very commonly with armed forces personnel that are returning from conflict zones. So the technique that I'm going to give a demonstration of, it was developed by a man called Andrew Huberman, a PhD professor at Stanford University in the US. His podcast, The Huberman Lab, has been a great resource to me professionally and personally in terms of neurobiology and the very latest modern research in terms of physiology, in terms of what is actually going on and is now being understood in terms of psychology and how different things work, particularly hypnosis. And a fantastic resource that I would encourage anybody that is interested in personal development and health and well-being to go and check out. He developed this technique called the space-time bridge, which is another technique that we can use in order to leverage the mechanism, the insula of our brain, in order to focus on the outside world, to exteriocept. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that episode of his podcast that he did, and I'll give a quick demonstration of my take on that I would use with my clients in a therapy setting. So to summarise what it is, it's an eye movement technique to communicate to your brain to focus externally, to become more present in the moment. In neurobiology, that would be called to exteriocept, to focus your attention and to use your body's natural senses in order to become more interested in the external world. There's another book that is along the similar lines, and we'll touch on this in the meditation section of the MindWorks course, called The Warrior's Meditation by Richard Haight. It's a book about how the samurai warriors in ancient times in Japan were able to develop and refine their ability to exteriocept so that they became able to almost predict, almost like a sixth sense, what their opponent was going to do, and to become so attuned to their outside world that they were able to keep themselves safe when in battle. It's a meditation technique, and I'll give some demonstrations of that as we move through the meditation course. It's really, really quite powerful, very interesting, and I'd highly recommend that book if you are interested in meditation or more spiritual thoughts and practices. So when your brain is focused externally, you are present and in the moment. That is what we're talking about. So being present, being here, not stuck in our thoughts it's sometimes a subject which feels out of reach, quite tenuous, something that is quite hard to grab hold of, particularly if you are the type of person like me that it does experience anxious thoughts or worries. But what we're really talking about when we get into the mechanism of that, the experience of that, is where our brain is switched onto the outside world and the thoughts that we're having on the inside slow down. So to summarise that technique that we're going to look at today, the Andrew Huberman space-time bridge, is that we're going to pick 3 or 5 points of visual focus at varying distances. So we're going to tell our brain to concentrate on something close, something a little bit further away, and then something further away, and then we're going to cycle through those different items of visual focus that are close, slightly further away, and further away still. We're going to calm our breathing, so we're going to keep a regulated rhythmic breath, sometimes called coherent breathing, and again we'll be talking about that in the meditation section of the MindWorks app. And we're going to hold our eyes slightly more widely open, and there is a reason for that. When we have our eyes more widely open, I won't do it straight down the camera because that might be a bit weird for those watching, is that we feel a change in our physiology almost immediately. So if you're watching this now, just hold your eyes slightly wider than you would normally do, and you'll feel different on the inside. There's a few things that are happening. One, your brain is releasing two chemicals into your brain. One is adrenaline, one is, or norepinephrine it's called in the brain, and acetylcholine. These are the chemistry. This is the chemistry set for concentration. When our brain detects that, there is a slight change in our physiology in our cardiovascular system, where there is a slight elevation, a perfectly natural, perfectly normal elevation in our blood pressure. That is required in order to get the necessary oxygen and blood flow into the brain, because the brain has detected that there's going to be something to concentrate on. So in order to help to keep that sort of calm and to use that to benefit us so that we don't experience anxiety from the additional chemistry that's going on with the brain, we're going to have nice, calm, regulated, rhythmic breathing. So to give a demonstration of this technique, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my thumb at a distance of whatever that is, 15-20 centimetres. I'll hold the eyes slightly wider open, and I'm just going to let my eyes rest on a very, very small part of the thumbnail. And just do that for 3 or so breaths. Already I can feel that slight agitation building. That's good, that's what we want. That's helping me to focus on the technique itself. When you're doing it, just allow the breath to become slightly more pronounced, slightly more exaggerated, rhythmic. And then we're going to change the distance of the visual focus so it's now at arm's length. So I'm going to hold my hand at arm's length, keeping the visual focus on the thumb, remembering to hold the eyes wide. And then I'm going to focus on all that I can see in my entire visual field. So for me, I'm looking over there at the wall, the windowsill. I can see the stand for the light and the camera stand in kind of this part of my visual focus. I can see the edge of the screen. Trying to sort of allow my mind to absorb all that I can see around me through the full visual focus. And then I'll come back to arm's length. And then, because this is a demo, come back to here. And you can cycle through that technique and until you notice that your mind is now become more switched on to the outside world, telling your mind consciously that through conscious control that it is now time to focus externally rather than internally. So to summarise then, we're going to choose 3 or 5 or maybe more, maybe less points of visual focus at varying distances. We're going to calm the breath, we're going to have it rhythmic, breathing in, breathing out, and holding the eyes slightly wider than we would normally do in order to help to communicate to our brain that we are looking to concentrate on the outside world rather than the internal world. So there it is. Remember, this is a practice, so remember to practice. If we just do this thing once, then you, like me now, will feel a slight change physiologically. And that the more we do that, the more benefit we will get from the technique itself, to practice regularly and to remember to do it periodically throughout the course of the day. If you do that first thing in the morning, then it will help to really set your mind up that today is the day that I'm really focused on the things that I need to be focused on out there in the world. So yeah, the more the practice we get, the more we benefit from it. So there we go. This is the first practical sort of mechanistic technique that I have for you, amongst many others that are to come in the full course. So do practice that. I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback on it. Practice it perhaps when you're feeling more anxious, practice it when you're feeling more calm, and just notice what it feels like for you on the inside. That it will feel different at different times when you practice it. Do let me know your thoughts, your comments, your observations, and how it works for you. I would love your feedback, and thanks again for joining me here on this course, and I do hope to see you in future videos. Thanks very much.